Alright, I just beat Gunpoint, the stealthy hacker spy game, and here's some of my thoughts about it. Gunpoint was a good game, if a rather short one. The platforming aspect is pretty solid. Your dude controls pretty well, and jumping around with your hyper trousers is pretty dang fun. Climbing around like Spider-Man adds a lot to sneaking around compared to most stealth games, and avoiding fights and going full stealth feels pretty dang good, and puzzle-solving portions feel more like solving problems rather than actual puzzles. The combat, however, is pretty limited. Dispatching guards can be pretty fun, since you can do it in so many ways, but after the novelty wears off, guards just become a slightly more dangerous part of the puzzle rather than a challenge to overcome. It doesn't help that the game treats guards as pieces of the puzzle from very start. The challenge in the game is mostly the Get X trophy on this mission department, something that I'm not a big fan of. You're rated on speed, violence, noise, witnesses, and how happy your client was with your performance. Basically, a client has a particular preference, such as minimal violence, and you're judged depending on how many dudes you punch or throw through a window. Ignoring the ratings, it's still not super easy at the start, but as you figure out what you're doing, the challenge definitely wanes towards the end. For me, the story and dialogue were the stars of the game. The humor and situations you find yourself in made me laugh out loud a few times. There were a lot of nice touches and details that most games overlook, one of my favorites being that the mission briefings are text message conversations held between you and another character, and the other character's response is always delayed with such and such as typing message. It would have been nice to stick some variety with in-person conversations, but the text conversations were done well enough for me to not notice the lack until after I beat the game. Even better, the moral implications behind your choices made me stop and think sometimes. Unfortunately, while there were implied consequences behind certain choices, the consequences for those decisions never really stretch beyond a verbal slap on the wrist. Sometimes that works in games, but I didn't really feel it in Gunpoint. None of your choices changed the course of the story beyond a few aesthetics. That may be nitpicking on my part, but I feel that the story really wanted to make you feel conflicted about making certain choices. There's even a couple situations where there's no right answer, which is something that I love in any game. There were plenty of situations where I sat back and thought, wow, I can say that, but do I want to? It just never reached into actual gameplay or branching story arcs beyond the final level, which only has one difference depending on which ending you choose. So even when it does play with the idea, actual gameplay consequences fall a little flat. The game boasts 20 missions, most of which can be finished under 5 or 10 minutes. I beat the game in about 4 hours with a thoughtful rating on just about every level. Thoughtful being the slowest speed rating that you can get. On a speed run, I can finish a few missions under a minute or two. Most levels are pretty small, and a couple of them are even the same level under different circumstances. The story wraps up nicely at the end, but it still leaves you wanting something more. Maybe I'm selfish, but if the game had shipped with a second campaign, even if the second one lasted only 5 missions or so, the length of the game would have felt a little more satisfying. Overall, it's a great game, even with the short campaign and the lack of meaningful gameplay consequences. I rate this game pretty high. The one place I see the game snowballing into a classic, its level creator is pretty lackluster. You don't even get most of the set pieces to play with, and it's a little wonky and hard to get the hang of it. It also lacks, as far as I can tell, the ability to make your own custom mission briefings like the main campaign has. If you could make something like the main campaign in the level editor, there would be nothing stopping Gunpoint from becoming a real gem that would continue producing fun missions and campaigns for years. It just isn't there right now. I could see Gunpoint being awesome if that were changed. Just sticking in some good mod support and maybe even a Steam Workshop would make its short campaign beside the point. We'll see where the dev goes with that, but I'm not holding my breath. Most games are lucky if they get some thorough bug fixes after release. This is the first game released by this guy, and it's made on Game Maker, which is already pretty limiting. We'll see if it happens, but I'll honestly be surprised if it does. So, the final verdict. Is it worth the price of $9.99? Uh, it doesn't meet my normal expectations of $1 of fun for every hour that you play, but I'd say so. It's good fun, presents a lot of unique mechanics, and is the best puzzle game I've ever played, and I don't normally enjoy games with puzzles in them. There's a lot of missing potential in its current form, but depending on how accessible the game is to designers and modders, I can see it becoming pretty dang awesome. If you're still on the fence about Gunpoint, play the demo. It is available on Steam and I believe on the dude's website. If you like what you see there, you'll probably like the full game. Just don't expect hours on end of stuffing up the world unless you like trying to get a perfect score on every single level. For me, I'm not unhappy with my purchase. I just wish there were more. Even in its current state, though, it's worth your time at least on the demo. If you have the money to spare, there isn't a reason you shouldn't get this game. Alright, well, this has been Night of Fools, and this is Gunpoint. Be sure to check it out.